Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come to our webinar. It's so great to be here. My name is Dr. Lauren Bell and I'm a senior statistician here at Verimed. I gained a PhD from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the design of trials for digital therapies with a focus on micro-randomized trials to improve engagement. Today I'll be presenting some of my doctoral research along with Gwen Perry, a statistician at Verimed who works within the oncology therapeutic area. In 2019, Gwen was awarded an NIHR predoctoral fellowship at the University of Reading. As part of her fellowship, with the guidance of her supervisor, Professor Sue Todd, she explored smart designs, adaptive clinical trials, and group sequential designs, while also undergoing her master's in medical statistics at UCL. And we are very fortunate to be joined by the talented Dr. Mia Tackney, a research associate at the Medical Research Council's Biostatistics Unit and the University of Cambridge, who will discuss her work on missing data with wearable devices. So we live in the digital age, and we also live with smartphones. Smartphones have brought unprecedented changes to every aspect of our daily lives, including how we treat and manage long-term chronic conditions. There are now many different types of digital health technologies available. These include digital therapeutic apps, which are prescriptive technologies that are part of clinical care pathways. These apps are treatments and require regulatory approval and oversight. There are digital therapeutic apps available on the market to treat a range of chronic conditions, such as depression, insomnia, anxiety, diabetes, cancer, schizophrenia, and obesity. These apps may leverage personal data collected over time, such as data gathered from wearables, self-reports and self-monitoring, ecological momentary assessments, and electronic health records to inform treatment strategies. Digital therapeutic apps can be a partial solution to the wait lists NHS currently faces. For instance, currently there is a large wait list of young people needing to receive treatment and support for a mental health condition. Providing an effective digital therapeutic app as a first-line treatment while waiting for second-line treatment from a professional may help improve patients' long-term health outcomes. Another type of digital health technology is the behaviour change app. These types of apps provide support to help seeking individuals during their everyday lives. Behaviour change apps are different to wearable or wellness apps, as they are grounded in theoretical frameworks and include evidence-based behaviour change techniques. Such interventions can provide accessible support to help seeking individuals to change their health behaviours, such as walking more, quitting smoking, or drinking less alcohol. We know that digital therapies develop differently to clinical drugs. The drug pathway is broadly linear, as the drug passes through various stages from first-in-human trials to post-approval studies. The FDA acknowledges that digital therapies and medical devices evolve iteratively through cycles of research, development, and implementation. This acknowledgement is captured in a statement from the FDA's Digital Health Centre of Excellence, which says, medical software manufacturers are encouraged to leverage the software technology's capability to capture real-world performance, to understand users' interaction with the software as a medical device, and to conduct ongoing monitoring of analytical and technical performance to support future intended users. That is, the cyclical framework of digital therapeutic apps reflects both evidence gathered in controlled settings, such as trials, as well as data gathered during real-world implementation to help optimize the treatment. The FDA also recognizes that different types of machine learning-based algorithms and interventions exist on a spectrum of automation, with some algorithms considered as static and any updates are made by humans. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are continuously adaptive algorithms, where the software actually makes a decision on how the intervention will update, evolve, and ultimately treat people over time. This development process presents new methodological challenges. For example, how do we set up scientific frameworks and make causal statements to ensure the app evolves as an optimal intervention? If our ultimate goal is to create an algorithm which updates itself, how can we provide good causal evidence the initial steps of the algorithm, and the evolution of the intervention is safe and effective and based on known theoretical frameworks. Another key challenge is developing good engagement strategies with digital interventions. Engagement can be thought of in two dimensions: usage and experience. Engagement can be defined as an investment of energy directed towards a vocal task or stimulus, and effective engagement can be conceptualized as an investment of physical, cognitive, and affective energies to bring about a pre-specified outcome. With this definition of engagement, there is a growing recognition of the importance of personal states of an individual which impact engagement and effectiveness. For example, a person's current mood, their current environment, recent individual health history can all moderate how effective engagement is in that moment. We can think of behavioral engagement, that is using an app as a mediator, and this sits on the causal pathway between downloading the intervention and achieving a good health outcome, and the cognitive and affective energies as an effect moderator, where the personal time-varying states of an individual could boost or hinder effectiveness of using the app in that moment. For example, a user experiencing low motivation or poor perceptions of the usefulness of the app has been found to be associated with higher risks of disengagement, and these personal states are likely to hinder any effectiveness. Therefore, strategies which boost a user's perception and motivation to engage with the intervention could be helpful to improve engagement and effectiveness. So, in order to solve the engagement crisis, we need to think about tailoring the engagement strategy to an individual's current state. And we need to do this in a manner which reflects the iterative cycles of research and development that digital therapies fit with best. Methodologies towards tailoring treatment policies to an individual is a growing field in medical research, and these treatments are can be known as dynamic treatment regimes or adaptive interventions. Adaptive interventions are personalized treatment policies which leverage markers of behavioral and clinical states with predictions of risk to personalize the choice of treatment to that individual at that moment. Dynamic treatment regimes and just-in-time adaptive interventions are similar types of interventions. They both adapt the treatment based on the individual at specific decision points in the regime. Just-in-time adaptive interventions are different to dynamic treatment regimes based on how frequently and quickly a person's state might change. For example, in a dynamic treatment regime, the treatment policy may change as we learn how a patient responded to a course of chemotherapy. If the patient responded well, then treatment may continue or stop. Or if a patient did not respond well, a different treatment could begin. There are usually only a few decision points in a dynamic treatment regime, whereas for a just-in-time adaptive intervention, the patient's state may change very rapidly and measured through real-time wearable devices, and we could adjust the treatment either hundreds or thousands of times. Just-in-time adaptive interventions can be thought of as personalized algorithms or a type of artificial intelligence. So we need a scientific framework which allows us to create dynamic treatment regimes or just-in-time adaptive interventions that are clinically effective. And I'll now hand over to Gwen, who will discuss how randomization can actually help us achieve this goal.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Oh, should we go back? Thank you. Thank you. So how can we create adaptive interventions in an evidence-based manner? So conventional parallel randomized controlled trials are experimental designs used to contrast the effect of receiving a treatment to the effect of a comparator. However, randomized trial designs, which allow for within-person randomization, offer us the opportunity to build adaptive, personalized interventions while also allowing us to make statements of causal effects. The main objective of a SMART design, which stands for Sequential Multiple Assignment Randomized Trial, is to develop effective dynamic treatment regimes, or DTRs for short. In order to inform the development of a dynamic treatment regime, A smart design will define some tailoring variables. Tailoring variables are time-varying values which help guide the decision rules of a dynamic treatment regime. For example, if a subject is starting to display a certain symptom, this can be used as a trigger for a different mode of treatment. These decisions are based on a set of decision rules which use the tailoring variables to predefine intervention structure. In this case, the specific symptom is the tailoring variable, and how the intervention is changed based on this tailoring variable is the decision rule. The main objective of an MRT design, on the other hand, is to develop just-in-time adaptive interventions. On the next slide, I'll explore an example of a study that uses the SMART design to develop adaptive interventions. The title of this research paper is Treatment Sequencing for Childhood ADHD, a multiple randomization study of adaptive medication and behavioral interventions. Here is the motivation for this study. There have been numerous studies and applications of both medication and behavioral interventions for ADHD in children. However, there are still disagreements about which treatment modality is preferred and also how ADHD treatment should begin. Furthermore, at the time this research paper was published, no studies had yet systematically varied and compared the sequence in which the two treatment modalities are implemented. With this in mind, the objectives of the studies are as follows. First, to assess whether the choice of initial treatment for ADHD in children influences the success of endpoint outcomes. In other words, whether starting with low-intensity behavioral intervention or low-dose medication is more effective in treating ADHD. The second objective is to assess which of the four embedded dynamic treatment regimes are most effective. And the third aim, in the case of insufficient response to the initial treatment, whether increasing the dose or intensity of initial treatment or adding the other treatment modality is preferred. Here are the research methods. This is a two-stage sequential multiple assignment randomized trial, otherwise known as a SMART design. In the first stage, children are randomized to either receive behavioral parent training and teacher consultation, which is the behavioral intervention, or extended release methylphenidate, the medication intervention. In the second stage, however, randomization is determined by two factors: A, which initial treatment the children were given in stage 1, and B, whether or not children responded to the initial treatment based on a predetermined definition of response. The children who responded after 8 weeks of initial treatment, based on parent and teacher ratings, continued on their current treatment. The children who did not sufficiently respond were either randomized to have their current treatment intensified or the other treatment modality was added in conjunction to the current one. Therefore, in this example, the tailoring variable is responsiveness measured after stage 1, and this influences the intervention option. The primary outcome of this study was the number of classroom violations exhibited. However, other outcomes were also measured, such as out-of-class disciplinary events, teacher and parent ratings. So let's consider an example of one of the four possible dynamic treatment regimes of this study. A child is randomly assigned to receive either medication or behavioral intervention in stage 1. So let's say the child is randomized to low-intensity behavioral intervention. If they respond, they continue with their current treatment of low-intensity behavioral. If they don't respond, they are re-randomized to either intensifying their behavioral intervention or adding medication to their current treatment. The dynamic treatment regime is defined by both their stage 1 and stage 2 treatments. So in this example, if the child is randomized to an intensified behavioral intervention in the event they're non-responsive, they are in this particular dynamic treatment regime. First, offer low-intensity behavioral intervention, then increase the intensity of behavioral intervention for non-responders, and continue low-intensity behavioural intervention for responders. Note, however, that if the child had responded, in theory, their treatment regime would be consistent with another dynamic treatment regime, the one that states first low-intensity behavioural and then add medication if non-responsive. That's why, when doing the analysis for the study, non-responders have double the rating of responders in order to account for underrepresentation, which is caused by re-randomization. Here are the tables of decision rules with the adaptive interventions and the intervention components of the study. As mentioned before, there are 4 possible adaptive interventions embedded in this design. With the child from the last example who belonged to the initial behavioural, then intensified dynamic treatment regime, this is the 3rd dynamic treatment regime from the first table. The estimates of these 4 adaptive interventions are measured and compared in order to address the second objective of which treatment sequence is most beneficial. In the second table, we have the details of the initial treatment and secondary adaptive treatment, medication, and behavioural. There are lots of elements to the adaptive treatment, but what's important to mention is that the children's ongoing states are continuously assessed in stage 2, and monthly adjustments may be applied to secondary treatments as needed for the child's benefit, based on the information provided. For example, intensified behavioural intervention includes individual parent training sessions, but may also include additional services based on a child's specific needs. So to summarise, here are the findings and conclusions of the study, looking at classroom violations only. The study found that beginning with low-intensity behavioural intervention showed significantly fewer classroom violations than starting on low-dose medication. Secondly, the study found that overall, the behaviour then intensifying behavioural intervention in the event of insufficient response was the best dynamic treatment regime based on the number of classroom violations. Third, which is the 3rd aim, when looking at only insufficient responders, we found that insufficient responders to first stage behavioural treatment, intensifying the behavioural intervention resulted in significantly fewer rule violations than adding low-dose medication. However, for insufficient responders to the first stage medication, there were no significant differences in the choice of the second stage treatment. So a child who started on medication, if they are insufficient, there was no statistically significant difference on the choice of second stage treatment. So to wrap up, here are my comments on the SMART study. We have shown the potential to develop meaningful adaptive interventions through the SMART design. SMART designs allow us to collect rich information about a treatment regime that can answer more complex questions than compared to a standard randomized controlled trial, such as how the sequence of interventions affects outcomes and what tailoring variables could be used to direct treatment, instead of just looking at treatment comparison. Using information gathered during the treatment regime allows us to tailor the regime for the benefit of the patient. And last but not least, the research for the analysis and development of adaptive interventions is still relatively new, but the literature on how to analyze this type of data and make causal inference is continuing to expand. Thank you for listening, and I'll pass on back to Lauren. Thanks.
Thanks, Gwen. Thanks, Gwen, for presenting such a lovely, clear example of an interesting SMART study. I will move on to drink less now and how we did some research which further optimized a behavior change up to become a personalized intervention. Drink less is a behavior change up for the general population of adults who are seeking to reduce hazardous or harmful alcohol consumption. And the app is freely available online and includes 6 different theory and evidence-based modules. These 6 evidence-based modules are normative feedback, goal setting, cognitive bias training, self-monitoring and feedback, and action planning and identity change. The version of the app before 2020 included a daily notification sent at 11 a.m. asking users to please complete your mood and drinks diary. The daily notification encourages self-monitoring, and this is recommended as an effective technique for a behaviour change app by the act of noticing recent behaviour and how this relates to a person's goal. However, we did not understand the causal effect of this notification on engagement, nor how to improve it. Digital health interventions often develop iteratively through cycles of research, development, and implementation. And we know that a behaviour change app can develop into a personalised intervention, such as a just-in-time adaptive intervention. Understanding how users engage with the current version of Drink Less could help guide further incremental improvements. As Drink Less has been available for quite some time, we had access to nearly 20,000 users' engagement data over nearly 2 years. This included over 800,000 sessions with the app. We wanted to make use of such rich information and explore how simple visualizations and machine learning techniques could help us understand patterns of engagement, as usage data is longitudinal, dense, and rich. Data visualizations provide at-a-glance insight from rich, dense, time-varying data. The first visualization on the left is a heat map of when the session with Drink Less began, and the heat map on the right is when time spent in total across all users in hours. The heat map shows us that there is a strong association between starting a session with Drink Less and the daily notification at 11 a.m. The total time spent on the app shows there is a noticeable increase of longer sessions in the evenings. This is confirmed by the line plots to the right. If and how to intervene at peak risk moments is a key research question, and our visualization suggests that evenings had a more frequent and longer sessions outside the peak 11 a.m. And in the evenings, users are more at risk or vulnerable to hazardous drinking. So going forward, we wanted to know if sending a notification in the evenings could have an impact on engagement. We also wanted to explore different trajectories of engagement over time. We created a data set with a binary variable of did the user use the app or not each day over 30 days. We applied a K-modes clustering algorithm to partition categorical data which uncovered 3 distinct trajectories. We named the 3 clusters the engagement cluster in green, the slow disengager cluster in yellow, and the fast disengager cluster in purple. To explore the association between the delivery of the notification and the subsequent near-term engagement of opening the app, we compared opening the app, yes, no, to the exposure period of 11 a.m. to noon and an unexposed period 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. We estimated the association between exposure to the notification and opening the app, quantified as a risk ratio. We fitted a model which adjusted for baseline covariates and also explored effect moderation by adding 3 interactions. The first interaction being exposure to the notification and days since download. The second interaction between exposure to the notification and the cluster, and then by adding a third 3-way interaction, which additionally allows the association between cluster and exposure to vary linearly by days since download. As Table 4 shows and Figure 4 shows, we can see that for the slow disengagers cluster, the probability of opening the app in the first week since download and the proxy risk ratio of the notification effect is high. But by day 30, both the probability of opening the app and the proxy risk ratio have fallen quite significantly. We can hypothesize that for the 1 in 5 users in the slow disengagers cluster, this daily fixed notification effect is not helping them and it's not keeping them engaged. And they are actually starting to habituate to the notification, is that they no longer notice it. Therefore, we conclude that optimizing the fixed daily notification in Drink Less is a worthwhile investment. To further optimize the notification policy, we developed a bank of notifications to increase users' reflective motivation to engage with particular intervention modules. We also wanted to increase use of other modules as we noticed that users were just typically recording their drinking diaries, which is what the notification policy instructed them to do. Examples of the new bank of messages include the message, recording if-then plans can help you drink less, or setting a doable goal can help you drink less. Take a moment to set a doable goal. We want to know the causal effect of our new bank of messages that have the causal effect on engagement. As discussed, micro-randomized trials allow for us to develop just-in-time adaptive interventions. A distinguishing feature of the MRT is the repeated randomization within individuals. This repeated randomization aids further causal inferences that parallel RCTs do not offer. The MRT is an experimental design that allows us to understand if the intervention has a near-term effect on engagement, and this averages over the course of the study, all individuals in the study, and the time-varying context the individuals experience during the study. And we can also understand if the near-term effect changes over time or depends on the contextual state of the individual. By understanding these effects, we can build more effective and less burdensome policies for delivering notifications. We know that MRTs can randomize patients many times, and this is different to a conventional parallel RCT. This timeline of MRT data is a helpful way to understand how data evolves in an MRT. Treatments are randomized at each decision point, which is AT, along with longitudinally measuring a near-term outcome after each decision point. Covariate data provided by sensors, wearables, or self-report may also be continuously gathered. Data in an MRT evolves as a collection of time-varying covariates, time-varying treatments, and time-varying outcomes, where history is everything known up to the point of randomization, and time-varying contextual states can be a summary of some variables. This is the flowchart of the MRT we undertook to optimize drink less. You can see we also included 2 secondary parallel arms to the MRT, as we expected to have the sample size to do so. In the MRT, every day at 8 p.m., users were randomized to receive a notification. The near-term outcome is if the user opened the app between 8 and 9 p.m. Here, we aim to target moments when patients could have an increased risk of alcohol consumption and the opportunity to engage with the intervention. We also included an arm of the current notification policy, that is the delivery of the standard notification every day at 11 a.m., and an arm of the no notifications at all, where users were sent no notifications and we followed all patients, their patterns of engagement over the first 30 days since download. Here are the slides which present the results of the primary outcome of the MRT. We know that sending a notification at 8 p.m. increases the probability of opening the app 3.5-fold. We can see that the new notification has a similar effect to the standard notification. Importantly, we have established causal evidence that the notification, as implemented in the MRT, increases near-term in-the-moment engagement. Yet when we examine the different notification policies, overall there's no statistically significant difference. However, there is a suggestion that a policy which includes no notifications has fewer sessions but longer length of sessions on the app. One might hypothesize that unprompted behavioral engagement may include more attentive interest and cognitive investment. Therefore, a user who is engaged with the app without any notifications may be an effective initial strategy to begin with. Figure 2 presents a Kaplan-Meier plot of time to disengagement across the 3 policies. This plot provides the estimated survival fraction of the first 30 days from the date of download between the 3 policies with 95% confidence intervals. Although the survival fraction for the no notification policy may seem to accelerate at a faster rate than the other 2 policies, all 3 policies had similar survival rates by day 23. So we've established that we have a large effect of increasing engagement from notifications in the moment. But the 2 policies tested in our trial did not have more patients remain engaged for longer compared to the no notification arm. Therefore, we need to go back to the cycles of iterative improvement to further optimize the notification policy. And this is where the strength of the MRT shines, and estimates of effect moderation can help guide the steps to personalisation. In this slide, we report the multiplicative differences in the notification effect, which demonstrates how recent states of engagement modify the notification's near-term effect. The near-term effect of both message types remains, and none of the estimates of effect moderation are statistically significant because of a limitation of the study lacking power. But interestingly, if a user received a notification the day before, the near-term notification effect of a standard message is reduced by 11%, whereas the effect of the new message remains stable. If a user was already engaged, that is, they opened the app between 8 and 9 p.m., the near-term effect of the standard message remains stable, but the near-term effect of a new message, a message from the message bank, which aims to motivate users, was decreased by 20%. Here we can show how understanding effect moderation by prior states helped us build an just-in-time adaptive intervention. That is, when a user is at risk of disengaging, it might be an optimal time to send a notification then which aims to boost motivation and perceived usefulness, and this could be a better personalised strategy going forward. Methods for estimation and inference from data gathered during an MRT face a number of challenges. Here are some of the challenges statisticians need to carefully consider. For such longitudinal data, one might consider using the generalized estimating equation with a non-independence working correlation structure to estimate marginal flex from a working model. However, it is well known that in the presence of time-varying treatments and time-varying covariates, that sequential conditional mean models estimated from generalized estimating equations can result in biased causal effects without strong and often implausible assumptions for outcomes that are binary. Methodological research has overcome these challenges and has established some good solutions. Estimation methods for MRTs include the estimator for the marginal excursion effect, which is a type of inverse probability weighting. And through centering also on the treatment effect, the estimator addresses each of these challenges listed here and provides a method to consistently estimate both the primary and secondary objectives of an MRT.
All right, so now we have a quick poll for you all. It should have just appeared on the screen, and the question is, what do you consider the most important challenges to designing MRT or SMART trials? A, what to consider as a tailoring variable or states for effect moderation. B, when to re-randomize patients. C, the sample size required for powering the primary objective. D, the reporting of the results. Or E, not sure. And you can vote on that in the poll section, or it will be on your screen. I'll just wait for a few moments for the votes to come through. Okay, so it looks like we've got 25% have voted for B, when to re-randomize patients, 50% for C, the sample size required for powering the primary objective, and 29% for D, the reporting of the results.
Oh, that's quite interesting. Thanks for that. When to randomize patients would be quite an interesting question as well, because the burden, if you treat people too much, so the notification policy, the random one implemented in the MRT, the causal effect is dependent on that policy. So if you have a very burdensome MRT where you're randomizing people to receive 5 notifications a day, that will have a very different causal effect compared to one that is less burdensome. Okay, thank you for that. Just to summarize my bit, the research has found that notifications have a strong impact for in-the-moment engagement. This finding offers the opportunity for behavior change scientists to directly target the precise momentary states of an individual, and to develop and implement dynamic theories for behaviour change with drink less. Further engagement is required to improve further research is required to improve long-term engagement. A type of machine learning called reinforcement learning may be helpful to personalise and optimise the sequence of notifications over time. The available data from our trial can provide a rich source of information to help guide the initial steps, that is, provide a warm start for the learning process of a reinforcement learning algorithm and improve engagement for Drinkless or other similar behaviour change apps. To conclude, our health systems are under a digital health revolution, and this involves a shift towards personalised medicine. We need theoretical frameworks which are dynamic and evidence which helps us guide under what personal states and conditions we should treat people. I hope we have shown that how we can leverage digital therapeutics as treatments which can treat the right person at the right time, and how new trials such as SMARTs, or new trial designs such as SMARTs and MRTs can help develop just-in-time adaptive interventions with transparency. I'm now very happy to introduce or hand over to Dr. Mia Tackney, who will discuss her research in handling missing data from wearable devices.
In this presentation, I'll be talking about handling missing data from digital endpoints in trials. So by this, I mean devices such as wearables that might track your step count or stride velocity, or it could be mobile related. So it could, for example, be electronic patient-reported outcomes. That's what I mean by digital endpoints. So it's a slightly different setting than what we just heard about, because I'm not using the digital technology to do the randomized treatment. And this is joint work with Elizabeth Williamson and James Carpenter, with whom I did a postdoc, and our collaborators at St. George's, Derek Cook, Elizabeth Lim, and Tess Harris. So I'm going to start by giving you a concrete example of what a digital endpoint might look like. So I'm going to talk about the PACE-UP trial. And this trial asks this question: does a 12-week walking intervention help to increase people's physical activity? So over 1,000 participants were in this trial, and they had to wear an accelerometer, so this is the digital device, for 7 days. Then they were randomized to one of 3 treatments, so either a 12-week walking intervention, which was given to them with instructions through the post, or a 12-week walking intervention with nurse consultations, or if they were randomized to the control arm, they were told to continue with their usual activities. Then after this, there was a follow-up period where they again had to wear this device for 7 days to track their step counts before and after the intervention. And in addition, there were later follow-ups to see if there were longer-term benefits of this intervention. So before going forward and talking about the missing data aspects, I'd like to find out a little bit about your experiences with digital endpoints. So we've got 2 poll questions related to this.
Yeah, so the first poll question should be on your screen now. Have you been involved in a trial with digital endpoints? So A, yes, I'm considering or planning a trial. B, yes, trial currently in progress. C, yes, trial completed. Or D, no. We'll just wait a few moments for those results to come through. Okay, so it looks like 43% of our audience are considering or planning a trial. 14% have a trial currently in progress, and the remaining 43% have said no.
Okay, excellent. So many of you are considering. I have a second question here. It asks mostly for those of you who have either been considering or have already experience with digital endpoints.
So if you answered yes to the previous question, what was the digital endpoint capturing? A, physical activity, B, sleep, C, heart rate, D, continuous glucose monitoring, E, electronic patient-reported outcomes, F, other, or not applicable. I'll wait a minute or so for those to come through.
Great.
Okay, so we've got 20%, I'll change again, 13% for physical activity, 38% sleep, none for heart rate, 13% for continuous glucose monitoring, 20% for electronic patient-reported outcomes, and the rest not applicable.
Okay, great. Thanks for participating. It's really useful to know about your experiences. So I would say what I'm going to talk about regarding missing data is mostly related to physical activity. However, I think there are some shared challenges with the other passive monitoring device related outcomes, such as sleep, heart rate, or the continuous blood glucose. I would say my talk is less related to the active digital endpoints, such as the electronic patient-reported outcomes. Okay, so going back to this particular example, I'm now going to talk a little bit more about the missing data issues. So when we have these passively monitored physical activity data, missing data is common, but it's hard to really grasp. So to illustrate this, I'm showing you 7 days worth of physical activity data. These plots go from midnight one day to midnight the next. This is just for one person. Each point is a 5-second interval, an epoch of length 5 seconds, and it's showing the vector magnitude, which is a summary of the accelerations in 3 dimensions. And that's something that can be converted to step count later. So looking at this, you can see sometimes there are short intervals where no movement is detected. And here it's actually a little bit ambiguous. If the person is sitting very still, because it's a short amount of time, it's possible that someone stays still for a short amount of time, or if they remove the device and it's missing data. We're talking about a hip-worn accelerometer from a few years ago, so it didn't measure other outcomes like heart rate, which could potentially solve this problem. Also, people were not required to wear this device in their sleep. So we have a short interval of no activity here, but it's hard to tell, did they just have a lie-in, in which case it's okay, or did they forget to put the device on in the morning, and that would be missing data. And if we look up here, there's quite a big chunk of missing data. I think this is quite clearly missing data. So you can have parts of days that are missing. In this person's profile, you have a whole day that's missing. And you can even have almost the whole week that's missing. So there is this question of how much missingness does there need to be before we define missing observation? Does it have to be missing hours, a missing day, or a whole missing week? So hopefully this illustrates that in the world of digital endpoints, missing data is slightly a different beast compared to more traditional endpoints. Okay, so what seems to be current practice, at least in my experience, is that typically the primary outcome is on a much more granular level. So it could be, for example, the average step count across the week. And normally you wouldn't really pay attention to this fine-grained epoch level data. You would just look at the daily summaries. So you can get total step count per day. You can also get the wear time per day. So this is the amount of time that people wore the device, and it excludes any period longer than 1 hour where no activity is detected. So that assumes implicitly that people can stay still for up to 1 hour. And a very common approach is that people will define a day as missing or not using a threshold on this wear time. So 540 minutes or 9 hours is a typical choice. Using this choice, you will find, for example, that this day right here is considered missing. But actually, a day like this, 539 minutes of wear time, that would end up being considered as missing too. So although this approach to handling missingness, it simplifies a lot of the challenges, there are quite a few disadvantages. For example, this choice of threshold, 9 hours or 540 minutes, it's arbitrary. Other authors use other choices of thresholds. And actually, your results may be sensitive to that choice of threshold. Secondly, it leads to loss of data. So for this day, we would simply discard the whole day as missing, and you would calculate an average using the remaining 5 days. So those 2 days that are missing would not enter the analysis at all, even if there is some partial data there. And thirdly, we're assuming that days are missing at random. So when you take an average of the observed days only and discard the missing days, you're assuming that when people choose to wear the device for less than 9 hours, that their activity levels are similar to the days when they are compliant and wearing the device for more than 9 hours. However, I think many of us might relate to the fact that you may not wear your device on days where you are less active. So on your couch potato days, you may choose not to wear your device, and that would be a missing not at random assumption. So the question we wanted to ask was, if we go back to this fine-grained epoch level data, if we choose to spend a bit more time looking at this data, can we handle missingness in a better way, in a more precise way that takes into account the time of day, for example, where missingness takes place? So to answer this question, I'll look at 2 parts of solving this. First is classifying missing intervals of time, and the second part is handling the missingness. So I'm going to give a brief sketch of how we came up with an algorithm that classifies intervals of time that are missing. So instead of classifying the entire day as missing or not, we identify parts of days that are missing. So I'm just going to illustrate this with a few examples. In this plot, I'm indicating in black the active periods where people are continuously going about their day, moving around with the device on. In blue, I'm indicating periods that we assume are sleep. So these are periods of no activity that last between 5 and 12 hours. So typically people have to remove this in their sleep. Now, something we found was that when you put on the accelerometer and when you take it off, this creates a large movement for the accelerometer, and you can actually see this in the data. So when there are periods of what we call non-wear, so periods where people have removed the device, you can clearly see that there has been a large movement, a large spike. And this is how we identify non-wear. This is in contrast with inactive periods. So these are periods where there are short periods of inactivity. However, there's no indication that the device has been removed. So it's possible that they're just sitting down watching TV or something like that. And for us, a particularly challenging type of missingness we found is when people forget to put on the device in the morning. So you end up with this period that is just way too long to be asleep. So here we have to make an additional assumption of when would they have put on the device. And we do that by looking at the average active window for that person for weekends and weekdays separately, because we know that there can typically be differences in schedules between weekends and weekdays. So this is a quick sketch of how you can identify periods of time that are missing. And how do we want to go about handling missingness then? So we choose to do this by using multiple imputation. The idea behind multiple imputation is you identify the areas that are missing in your data set. Then you create M copies of your data set. And within each of those M copies, you're going to replace the missing values with a plausible value, typically under the missing at random assumption. So for us, we would be replacing those intervals of time that are missing with a plausible value of the step count that we believe would plausibly have happened in that interval. Then you treat each of these M complete data sets now as a data set in its own right, and you analyze them, obtaining the parameter estimates and variances. And then you obtain a pooled result using Rubin's rules. So this pooled result will take into account the uncertainty around the missing value, because in each of the imputations, the imputed value will be slightly different, and that reflects the uncertainty around the missing value. Now, what makes this quite helpful in this space of digital endpoints is that even though your analysis model is on the level of the average step count, we are handling missingness on the epoch level, on a much finer level of the data set, and multiple imputation allows you to do that. And in addition, you can do sensitivity analyses to the missing at random assumption in quite a straightforward way when you use multiple imputation. So how do we come up with these plausible values of what the step count would have been in those missing intervals? Well, I'll give you a quick sketch of how you can do this in a non-parametric way. So in this donor-based imputation approach, what you do is, once you identify these intervals that are missing, you look at intervals from the same person, different days, but the same time of day. So you can see that I've highlighted the donor pool for each interval that we find that is missing in this particular case. And what you would do is you would replace the missing interval with a randomly selected value from your donor pool if you have at least 4 items in your donor pool. However, in some situations, you may find that there's too much missingness across a particular person's profile. And if that's the case, you would impute with a non-self donor. So that means that you would have to identify a person who is as similar as possible to this current person, and you would do this by matching on key characteristics. So characteristics could be things like sex, age, BMI, and activity levels at baseline. So I've given a quick overview of this approach. If you'd like to find out more about how to use multiple imputation for accelerometer outcomes, this first paper gives a framework for how to do this, and also talks about how to handle sensitivity analyses. And in this paper, we look at a parametric approach to doing multiple imputation. The second paper describes the non-parametric approach that I just described and compares this method to other existing methods in simulation studies. Finally, missing data is one of several important challenges that we would face as digital endpoints become more and more a part of clinical trials. The FDA has provided draft guidelines on using digital health technologies in clinical trials. And Sophia Villar and I provided a comment to this draft guidelines to highlight some of the key methodological challenges that we think need a lot more attention, more than what has been provided so far in the literature. So you can have a look at this through the QR code. So I would like to say thank you for this invitation and opportunity to speak. And thank you for participating in the poll. And I'll now hand over to Lauren.
Thank you, Mia. That was a really lovely presentation about how to think about data from missing walking devices and step counts, and the challenges to carefully think about. I would like to conclude by first mentioning the references here, which are some of our papers, or also some of the papers that heavily influenced our research. And importantly, I would also like to provide some acknowledgements of the important collaborators who have supported or worked with us during the course of our research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mia, Lauren and Gwen, for your presentations. So the floor is open for questions and answers. We've got a Q&A panel in the right-hand side of the screen where you can put any questions, but we appreciate that we've covered a lot of ground in the last hour, and there may be new terminology which is new to some. So we're happy to continue the discussion via email if you want time to formulate your question. So feel free to email marketing@veramed.co.uk if you want to, and I can forward on the question to our presenters today. But we do have one question to start us off, which is, what is the difference between smart trial design and factorial design? So I think I'll hand over to Gwen at this point.
Thanks, Katie. Could you make my camera? Oh, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for that question. So basically, the main difference between a smart design and a factorial design is that a smart design has been developed with the idea of developing dynamic treatment regimes, whereas a factorial design isn't really built for that, because a factorial design doesn't incorporate changing intermediate outcomes that are collected. So for example, it doesn't consider response rate in order to influence second randomization. So the randomization and where patients are going to be allocated is very much fixed and it's predefined, whereas with a smart design, it's very much influenced based on how the patients of the trial are getting on through time varying tailoring variables. So that's the main difference. And also the factorial design is mostly interested in just the different treatment combinations, like one point in time, whereas a smart design is very much, well, a dynamic treatment regime with a smart design is very much interested in the sequence of the treatment. So how the treatment goes along over time and how that affects endpoint outcomes.
Wonderful, thank you, Gwen. So I think that's all for the questions for today, but like I said, if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to email marketing@veramed.co.uk. So thank you everyone for attending. It's great to have you here, and you can find out more about Veramed at veramed.co.uk and go to veramed.co.uk/webinars to find out more about our upcoming webinars, and it will be great to see you there. Thank you everyone.